All right. Welcome back, friends and comrades. I'm very pleased for today's episode. Today, we have a special treat for you. We are going to be talking about the French philosopher Michel Clouscard with one of his top students, Aymeric Monville. And Aymeric is actually a recent friend of mine. We've been corresponding for a few months now over various projects. He's the publisher of Delga Publishing House, Delga Editions, which he can tell you a little bit about. Aymeric is also a philosopher and a writer in France, and is somebody who is on the communist left in France and has really maintained a fidelity, I think, to the thought of Michel Clouscard in a time of a great, what you might call kind of liberal reaction across the West, but especially in France. We've been watching very closely everything that's been happening recently with Macron. It's very tragic. Michel Clouscard is a thinker who provides a sort of systematic criticism and critique of May 68 thought, which is known as French theory in the United States. And his work has not, unfortunately, been translated to English. So I have had to rely on unofficial translations because my French is not that great. But Aymeric and his comrades, including myself and many others interested in Clouscard, are working to change this reality and to finally begin to translate Clouscard for an English audience. So today's conversation, Aymeric, is really a chance to just introduce an English-speaking world more to the main concepts of Clouscard. Could we begin with an understanding of your own relationship first for yourself, if you don't mind, telling us how you discovered Michel Clouscard and what first seized you about his thought as a younger student?
Oh, hello everybody, and thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. I'm very pleased to speak about my old friend. It was also a friend to me. Yes, the paradox is I published this very little book on Clouscard in English, but there's the only thing you can find about Clouscard is in this book, Neo-Capitalism, according to Michel Clouscard, with the foreword of the great philosopher Gabriel Rockhill. And the problem is we need translations of Clouscard, and of course we found good translators. And I know that a lot of people in the philosophy framework in the United States, in England, are very interested in his works. And so we start talking about it, and I'm sure that in the near future it will be a main topic. It's true that in a way it's an antidote to French theory, because what you call French theory is only a part of French thinking. And it's true that he was the major Marxist opponent to all these thinkers at the same time, beginning in the 60s, and a critique of some what he called the counter-revolutionary elements of May 68. And of course, he was a partisan of the workers' movement, of all what the workers could achieve during this period. But the main paradox with May 68 is that the two forces of resistance in France, I mean, Gaullism or communism, are just plummeting just after these events. And it was the comeback of, I would say, the Atlantist forces in France. Even in the right or in the left, social democracy, for instance, that was very pro-NATO. And in the left, what we call the Orleanist right, which calls the right of the affairs of the economy of um, of, of the stock exchange. And in this, if we want to make a balance of 68 in France, it's very strange, because the beginning of the loss of sovereignty in France begins from the 70s, from the 80s, with um, the encirclement in France within the European framework. All has begun from this period. Of course, there was a crisis period, economic period, and it's true that Michel Clouscard were um, were loyal to I think the workers' movement in France. He was close to the French Communist Party. Was not a member of the French Communist Party because he wanted to maintain his independence. But of course, he was very. He wanted to remain close to the people of France, to the main workers, and he was very diffident with all the fashion theory of some little leftist groups at this moment, and of course we had bad chance. We had the chance to have a thinker who was very original, who has written a great work at this time. And I know you're one of the best knowers of this because you had the advantage to that you could read it in French. In some transcriptions we gave you, and that's fantastic. And yes, but of course, if you want just to analyze French theory, we can see how anti-Marxist it was, and without needing someone to embody the opposite. As philosopher, we are capable of just analyzing the defaults of one theory. It is something I am very uncomfortable with. It's to present someone as a new commodity fetishism. That's a problem with French theory. Every day you need someone new, a new face, and things like that. Even if this man is just recalling things of the past, or just taking one part of the Hegelian system in order to say I am contradicting Hegel, for instance. But it's just digging a part within the entire building. It's something I'm very uncomfortable too. But it's true that it was very specific. He had a literature gift, because in a way I would compare him. It's something that people reproach me because my comparison is much more linked with the literature, but I would compare him with Balzac. And you know how Marx he was fond of Balzac, even if Balzac was a Catholic and a monarchist. But Marx wanted, after the writing of the Capital, he wanted to write. It was one of his projects. He wanted to write a book on Balzac, explaining how and there are some very important, when you study the Marxist theory of art and literature. There is a famous letter of Engels to Miss Harkness about Balzac, about the victory of realism. Even with his Catholicism, monarchism, he was so good a writer that he completely explained how, for instance, monarchy was not possible anymore in France. And that's the victory of realism in. But of course, Michel Clouscard was a Marxist, was a pro-worker. He was son of a miner in southwest of France. There's no problem, and it's true that he had an insight. He saw all the developments of French society after the war, the new society, new capitalism, his new strategy, what he called, because he invented this concept, he has called it libertarian liberalism. And for instance, something that's sometimes history gives us sign, because the main leftist representative of May 68 in France, his name was Daniel Cohn-Bendit, and now he's very close to the circle of powers of Emmanuel Macron. And this man said, I am a libertarian libertarian liberal. And so, using the concept of Michel Clouscard that he coined 40 years before, and he explained this this concept, this shift, this new strategy of capitalism. He explains and in true, I'm also uncomfortable with the word prophet. I think it's like selling someone to people, but it's true that something that he saw. He said that just after this strategy of making repression against the producer, but leniency for the consumer. That was the new formula of new capitalism. You can do what you want if you have money. Everything. Um, Everything's possible for the consumer, but not for the producer. And he said after the main problem was crisis. And he said after this ideology, there will be a return of fascism. And that's what we are now living in France, because even the decadency of the anti-imperialist um, accuracy, for instance, left in France, has united itself recently on a program that is based on the furnitures of weapons to Ukraine. That means to help a proxy war of the NATO in Ukraine. You can see how France has completely shifted to the rights all these years, and it's something that Michel Clouscard saw. In a way, if uh, I wouldn't something I refuse is to say that it's a new Marx. It's something absolutely ridiculous. It didn't write a single word on ontology, on I know dialectics of natures and things like that. That was not this kind of a philosopher. He was, maybe you can call him a sociologist. You can call him a writer and a good analyst, but he explained how it worked and how ideology worked. Maybe he wrote the not German ideology, but French ideology of this period, and that's what is important. But of course, he's a Marxist. He's in framed. He didn't revolutionize Marxism at all. And for instance, he was not an economist. He relied on the analysis of the French Communist Party and capitalist monopoly apparatus at this moment. No, but on some, and he was very original in the fact that he was. We can compare him to Rousseau. He was completely. He was fascinating by the proximity of his life with that of Rousseau, because he was. If you can make an analogy, and he saw it perfectly. Rousseau was very special within the Enlightenment, French Enlightenment, because Voltaire, especially Voltaire and Helvétius, not Diderot. Diderot was very, they were very close friends with Rousseau. Rousseau came to the prison of Diderot when he was in prison because of the letters about the blind. But Voltaire and Helvétius, they were only interested in the fight against Catholicism, against absolute monarchy, things like that, in order to create a British institution in France, and also was for a complete reshaping, very on equal basis of people. He creates a social contract. He was, in a way, he announced what Robespierre and Saint-Just did during French Revolution, is to, as Marx said about the Jacobin Republicans, they wanted to to put revolution to an end with their means, because at this moment you cannot speak about a French proletariat at this moment. Maybe in England, but not in France. France was not so developed from an economic point of view. But on the principles of a republican state in France, the Jacobins wanted to put it, and they were disciples of Rousseau. And that's why, for instance, even Robespierre said that atheism is aristocratic. It means, for my part, of course, we are, a lot of us, we are atheists. There's no problem with that. But he said that that was not the main fight at this moment. It was a way to divide people, because the main people were believer at this moment. That was not the most important thing. Was class struggle, and was and there was a break within the Enlightenment, and Clouscard saw the same thing within what we call the French left at this moment, and including the French, what you call French theory, which is a part of French theory. You know that we use this word when you speak in French, we use this word in English because you know it's something that the Americans choose. Speaking about France, just a part of the French thinkers at this moment. And it's true because he had some very proletarian origins. I don't say that it's obligatory, compulsory to have proletarian origins in order to be a good Marxist, but he really understood it like that, like a class struggle within French theory, within the French theorists at this moment, and he absolutely refused it. He didn't know everything. I wrote recently a book with Gabriel Roquil that will be published in France, which is called Requiem for French Theory, and Gabriel helps me analyzing all the CIA has done in order to promote French thinkers. At the beginning of the 66 at the Johns Hopkins University with the Ford Foundation. It's very well documented. And it's true, it helps me understanding that, of course, Clouscard was not aware of of all that, but he understood perfectly which was promoted by the power, in which means at this moment. And of course, he always remained loyal to the French people, and he made like a class struggle with these people. Sometimes, I'm like a lot of a Marxist thinker. I'm from petit bourgeois origins. I would just say that it's oh, you go too far. Please, you must make some nuances and innuendos. I don't know, things like that. But he was completely from the beginning. He had a nose, a class nose, and he understood why it has been chosen in order to destroy the left. And we conclude with Gabriel that the influence of French theory was radically terrible for the left, especially in America, because it created the conditions for a division of all the people, not on the class basis, but on identity politics. People are fighting against each other, and the left is incapable to unite itself. This has this consequence, and in fact, it destroyed Marxism, the possibility of a Marxist organization in the US, maybe in France too. Uh, Excuse me, I'm speaking a bit all of it, and I know you know very well the work, and I'm sorry because it's a blessing to have an English speaker who knows Clouscard very well. I would be very happy to hear you.
Sure. Okay, so thank you for that. I mean, it's very helpful, kind of laying the foreground, laying the context of his polemics with the French left, with French theory, with these thinkers. We'll return to that, but let's take a step back and understand Clouscard's origins as a sociologist philosopher through looking at his dissertation, which has the title of Being and the Code. I think that's a proper translation.
Mhm.
It's a very interesting book. We could summarize this intervention as two sites of influence from Marxist thought. The first is Lukács and the second is Lucien Goldmann. Lucien Goldmann is not spoken of too much these days, unfortunately, but he wrote a very important book called The Hidden God, which you could understand as an effort to systematize the framework that Lukács develops in History and Class Consciousness of 1923 by applying the same methodology that Lukács develops to the history of the origins of the bourgeoisie as a distinct Weltanschauung, as a distinct class worldview. And his argument is that Blaise Pascal, provides the framework, the rudiments of a tragic worldview that is useful for bourgeoisie precisely because it allows for the preservation of their class composition. So immediately Goldmann locates this ideological worldview of a class. And Michel Clouscard's been in the code, as I understand it, and you've written an overview of the text, an introduction to the text, seeks to extend Goldman's argument in some sense by tracking French society in a more rigorous way than Goldman did, yeah, up through the modern period, up through modern capitalism, yeah. So it's a very ambitious text. And I'll say one final thing, and then I'll invite you to talk about it. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote a review after reading the dissertation that was very positive. He thought it was ambitious. He said this is a life's work. And indeed, I think that's the best way to understand Clouscard's effort from this point of view, because all of his work is sort of, maybe you could say, an expression of that effort. You know, it's kind of his initial wager that he's always trying to fulfill, which is, how do we create a sociological and historical account of the class composition, of the class ideology, of the ruling class, of the bourgeoisie, from the ancien regime up and through the modern period. So that's my understanding of being in the code. Can you further elaborate on this for us?
Yeah, yes, that's fantastic. And it's true that you're right to say that was very, very ambitious. And even Sartre said in order to fulfill all the tasks, we would needed a lot of teams of scholars, in order to do that. In fact, it's a way, it's a very lunatic project, a mad project. He saw the hidden God. It's true that Lucien Goldman disappeared even in France, but not the hidden God, which is written in the letters faculty, because his analysis of Racine, Racine is a bit like Shakespeare for us. It's even if it's difficult to understand to foreigners, it's something that is difficult to translate. But of course, and Pascal, these are our classics. So it is now written without taking a good enough care about his methodology, which was to analyze as you said, the Weltanschauung of the class Weltanschauung of some parts of the society. He took, for example, the Jansenists during the century of Louis XIV, of Louis with how do you say, Louis the 14th, a great Sun King. So
Exactly. Yep.
Versailles and things like that. There was a kind of opponents. It was difficult to be an opponent at this moment, but Racine began with them at this the first period. And you can see some, even if he was a historian of the king, he remained truthful in some ways to this kind of philosophy. And Goldman goes until Kant, which is Kant, Immanuel Kant, which is very, very strange. He explained about the tragic vision of society. This hidden God is a God who doesn't appear on the scene. It's far away from the world, and but you always live beneath the eye of the God. And which class developed this thought at this moment? And it was a real Marxist analysis, and it worked. And of course, the fact of Michel Clouscard, what he wanted to do, he saw that, for instance, the Kantian categories in mind, which are very good described by the German philosopher. He saw, like every Marxist, and Lenin saw it perfectly in his philosophic cahier, heft, philosophical notes. He knows that they have a story. In the development of mankind, they are due to material basis of these Kantian categories. And he wanted to, what Clouscard wanted to make, it was a story of the bourgeois way of thinking from the beginning, from the Middle Ages. And that was his project. It's true that at this moment, even both Goldman and Clouscard were influenced by structuralism thought. But the problem with all Marxists with structuralism, excuse me, it's difficult to say in English, with structure, it was not structure, because we don't have any problem with structure, because when you perceive something like a structure analysis, like Saussure did for language, or something, is always something enthusiastic for science. And you made some progresses. The problem is the link between the change of structures, because if you're all a strict structuralism, you don't have any place for revolution, for changing, and that's something that a dialectician cannot admit. And so Lucien Goldman, at this moment, he creates the word genetic structuralism. It is a word that sometimes later Bourdieu took to him without naming it. So it was he robbed this concept in a way, but it was a part to fight within the structuralist framework at this moment, trying to get close to the class struggle, which are the main things that changes these structures. For instance, the main opponents at this moment was the order of things of Michel Foucault. In French, it's not the French title. In French, it's les mots et les choses, the words and the things. And the main project of Foucault was to say there are some epistemes. It's the Greek word, some framework of cadres of thoughts, which are pertaining to a certain century, and from then you go to the classic age, where he said, for instance, at the classic age, you have no political economy. They don't think within thought of a political economy. But the problem, for instance, that's and for him, the classical age, it was the beginning was 1615, 1650. Excuse me, 1615. It was the second part of the Don Quixote of Cervantes. And the main problem for Foucault that at the same year, Antoine de Montchrétien, which was a French economist, published a treaty of political economy, and he coined the subject and the concept at this very moment. But you know so it's ridiculous, because Foucault lacked a lot of historical facts in order to support what he said. But what was his objectives speaking about that? Is to say that political economy was a thing of the 19th century, linked to Marx. And he said, like in this very book, in The Order of Things, he said, Marxism is like a fish in water within the 19th century, but out of this century, it's like if he were out of water, he dies. He dies because it was ridiculous, because at the same moment, that was maybe the apogee of communism in the world, until I think the fall of Saigon in 1975. That was the apex of communism in the world. After there was a reaction, as you know, of course. But that was his objective. But the methodology he uses is very dubious, and of course it's what I call the violence of the structuralist method. And people like Goldman and Clouscard were trying to react themselves with this kind of a lot of structures that evolve themselves in order to arrive to what he called, maybe we can speak about that now, the neo-Kantianism thought, because it completely reshaped this concept. Maybe it's very difficult to explain it even in French, but maybe I know you're a knower, you know how to explain it, and you were interested in this concept. I think it's not only I precise for the readers and for the viewers. Neo-Kantianism as the concept of Michel Clouscard is something more vast that the school of Bade and Marburg people like that. It's something that completely describes the bourgeois thought.
That's right. I think this is a good time for us to introduce this well, Clouscard invents a particular concept to elucidate the neo-Kantian tendency within contemporary philosophy, coming largely out of Husserl. So he thinks that Edmund Husserl develops a conception of what Clouscard names the anti-predicative thought, which is tied to structuralism eventually, but it's founded in phenomenology. And you could sort of understand it, I believe, by invoking Lukács's concept of irrationalism, because for Lukács, that's what irrationalism refers to. It refers to a particular operation on behalf of intellectuals, philosophers, but other intellectuals as well, to operationalize the noumenon, the unknowability of society, of history, of subjectivity. And then to, like, for example, if you fast forward to Clouscard's text, Neo-fascism and the Ideology of Desire, what does he call Deleuze and Guattari? He calls them neo-Kantians. Why? Because he says the revolutionary schizo, the schizophrenic, romanticizes the noumenal as the epistemology, as the form of revolution, that only the revolutionary schizophrenic has this touch with the unknown, with the Kantian category, right?
Yes.
So that's one way to think of it. I think another way to think about it is in relationship to the anti-predicative logic, which in another text, Clouscard will say a thinker like Lacan conceives of the mirror stage, for example, as completely untethered from a causality in the mode of production. So that's important. That's what makes neo-Kantianism anathema to Marxism and to materialism, because it's, I guess you could say, deriving a theory that has no relationality to production. It's not determined by productive sphere. Yeah. So this would be some of the ways to think how bourgeois thought will rely on a conception of, again, various of its categories, with a complete denial or obfuscation of the productive sphere entirely. And I understand Clouscard's work as trying to reposition production in the ontology and in the epistemology of modern philosophy. So you could say that neo-Kantianism is this pervasive idealist obfuscation of how the productive sphere determines thought and being and social being. Yeah?
Yes.
We know what Marx says about the primacy of social being in the thesis on Feuerbach, right? That's my summary. Please feel free to elaborate more.
It's fantastic. You explained better than me. If I may add something, uh, it is what is typical bourgeois, because it's the incapacity to go from Kant to Hegel. That means to dialectics noumenon and phenomenon, because you have this noumenon that you can conceive but not think, and you have this phenomenon that you can know but not really conceiving it. This cut between two parts, two worlds. You have moral from a part with art, aesthetics, and it's something that is called with that you can just perceive with the heart, for instance, and you have all that which is technically, and this kind of division is typically bourgeois, because you can they for instance, just to give you an example, if you have an explanation of art, for instance, social explanation of art, they told you that you are reductionist and you mechanicism, and you cannot explain things. But when they want to do, how can you explain it? They say it's unexplainable. That's a typical neo-Kantian, because Kant was very more profound of this. But this we say neo-Kantian because an incapacity to. It's a way of dealing with two different worlds, and it's true that France just after the war knew this kind of distinction. You had Sartre on a way, existentialism, with a complete unconditional freedom. And he said, because in Sartre thought, you have always the possibility, because of course you mentioned that Sartre was loved the thesis of Clouscard, but Clouscard, even if in his youth, he was Sartrean, like all the French at this moment, but he was not a Sartrean, because this existentialist conception of freedom, unconscious, there's something that is typical of Sartre at this epoch. He said we were not um, just under German occupation. We had the possibility to have a total freedom because we can choose. You can always choose this freedom as an existentialist act of things like that. It's something that you can choose. You can decide to choose this freedom unconditionally, and it's something like developing the noumenon phenomena. And just after existentialism, there was like a reaction, like a specular, like in a mirror. You had the tendency of structuralism in France. That's people were just dealing with the phenomenon and explaining we are the experts, we are the scientists, we organize a society. It is based like that, and it doesn't develop itself. And it's true that France was there was a shift in this historical shift at this moment. There was a period of Second World War, and then the post-colonial wars, Indochina, and then Algeria, which was a very hectic, difficult political period in France. And then during the Gaullist years, just after the end of the Algerian War, they seemed to be the end of all politics, the end of everything, and that the structuralism came into power. And something that is paradoxal, that the people who were chosen by the United States to embody French theory, it was in '66, and it was that's why you call them new structuralism, because a lot of them were structuralists in this way. They were all anti-Marxist at this moment, and it's true that even the CIA, for instance, waged a war also against Sartre, because Sartre, it was engagement theory. It was a kind of, it was not Marxism, but it was a kind of a romanticized communism. And it was too much. It was better to have some good clerks like Foucault at this moment, because it was not. Rockhill explains it very well. He has all the documents on him. He was a good civil servant of de Gaulle at this moment. And just suddenly after the events of May '68, all this neo-structuralism developed a tendency to radical politics, but only in words. And they created something new, something very fashionable and radical in a way, but not just paying lip service to conception of revolution at this moment. And that explains why, with this concept of neo-Kantianism, and especially you mentioned neo-fascism and ideology of desire. That's the just after the being and the code of Clouscard, which is his thesis, neo-fascism and ideology of desire. I would, if we can translate something, I think it would be very important to start with this one or maybe another. But it was a pamphlet aimed at Deleuze at this moment, but all the shifting of the society just after '68, and that's where he built this concept of liberalism. But his key process is to replace Deleuze in the reflexes of the bourgeois thought. Not only if you take them too seriously, just becoming in the framework of their thought, of their concepts, you miss the point. You miss what were their aim from. Not really their aim, because they didn't need to be conscious about it, but it's the results, the results of their policy in making so blatant anti-Marxist, like Deleuze did, I think, from the beginning with his book on Nietzsche. His book on Nietzsche is an anti-dialectical Nietzsche on philosophy. It's a completely anti-dialectical book, and he saw at this moment the people to kill was Hegel. Hegel in philosophy, killing Hegel in philosophy means killing Marx in politics. At this moment, it was very obvious. So, with this concept of neo-Kantianism, I think he describes perfectly the aim of avoiding things to be changed in society.
Yeah, that's let us a lot of people would benefit from neo-fascism and the ideology of desire, because it's a book which is a criticism of Freudian Marxism.
Mhm.
Freudian Marxism, starting with Wilhelm Reich through Marcuse to Deleuze and Guattari. Those are the three
Mhm.
figures that are analyzed in the text. It's not that long of a text. It's I think it's worth mentioning, Aymeric, that the style of Clouscard's writing is very unique in the sense that he writes in theses styles.
Mhm.
And I wanted to ask you if you could speak about his style. One of the
Mhm.
things that he will often do, and you see this in his book, The Seduction of Capitalism, or The Capitalism of
Mhm.
Seduction, depending on how you translate it,
Mhm.
is he will say, he will invent an interlocutor of a voice who he is speaking to. And in that book, it is I think he uses the common man, the common reader, precisely to navigate the incoherence of modern society and all of its rights. He uses a lot of kind of anthropological conceptions of understanding the world that we live in. How can we understand the complexity of this world? Clouscard in this book tries to simplify it for the common reader and to keep the attention of the reader. And this is one of his most popular books, by the way,
Yeah, yes, it's
in
true.
terms of the sales of the book.
Mhm.
Many, tens of thousands of sold, if not more. And I was very struck by this because he is giving a structuralist account of the what he calls worldly initiation into the capitalist system. Um, so I want to invite you to talk about, because I think that the Seduction book is very close to the neo-fascism and the ideology of desire book. In some sense, they are companion books, I
Mhm.
believe.
Mhm.
In a sense, what Clouscard is saying, though, is a continuation of being in the code, in the sense that Freudian Marxism is an ideology that doesn't acknowledge or cannot see that it is in service of bourgeois class interests.
Mhm.
Therefore, it is a neo-Mandarin ideology. And it performs what he calls a sort of cultural terrorism, is a phrase that he uses frequently.
Mhm.
And its operations are meant to obliterate the categories of Marxism uh, as it pertains to an understanding of social class and social forces. And it performs, therefore, a confused reading of three figures: Nietzsche, Marx, and Freud. He will say that Deleuze and Guattari make Nietzsche, Marx, and Freud completely decentered from their own coherence. So
Mhm.
after they are done with Nietzsche, Marx, and Freud, they no longer does either think or make any sense. It's a kind of confused synthesis
Mhm.
that has no practical import whatsoever. So, anyways, why don't we start with a bit of an articulation? Because one of the questions that I had for you is if you could explain, a little bit about first, maybe this theory of neo-fascism. I think that obviously in the United States, we've had a lot of debate about neo-fascism. How do we identify it? Yeah. Uh, what would Clouscard say,
Mhm.
regarding these debates?
Just to specific something about Freudian Marxism, and then I will answer to neo-fascism. I try to answer. Uh, no, excuse me, Clouscard, when he saw the word Freudian Marxism, he said, I think in French and in English it's the same. It means when you say Marxist at the end of the word, that means that the most important thing is Marxism. And he said all these people, they were not Freudian Marxism, there was Marxist of Freudians. And that's was the problem, because he had nothing against for instance, the discoveries, the major discoveries of Freud. For instance, when Anna O, his patient, say to Freud, "Listen to me. I'm not only a muscles. I'm not only a body which is suffering. I am also a man, a woman of parole, which is talking." And you must analyze my talks, what I'm talking, and this one to this one of the most major discoveries of Freud, and maybe the unconscious, and the way even Lacan, when he said that unconscious is structuralized as a language. It's true that the main thing with dreams are made like this. You can make a structural analysis of dreams. There was a part that which are scientific in Freudian way. But if you not accept to analyze it, so for instance, when you are the father in the psychoanalysis, you must you are obliged to admit that it's a father of class. It's a class father. It depends on which society, in which framework, what is the role of the father in I don't know. Austrian-Hungary Empire. It's not the same with father today, of course. And of course, the concept of Freud have to be replaced in a historical way of approaching things. And that's in his way he created the concept of Oedipus of praxis, praxis Oedipus. Not just because Oedipus saying, okay, it works, and so you can admit that it's something that is efficient in order to analyze the light of little babies. But it happens in very different social conditions, and that's was his way. He proposed. In a way, he was a big critic of Freudo-Marxism, but in his sense, he was the only Freudo-Marxist at this moment. So let's get back to neo-fascism. Yes, that's something very strange. Like it's in 1972, he spoke about neo-fascism, and we were at this moment, and it was the same in America. People were only Jean-Luc Godard, maybe he's a French filmmaker, which is famous. He spoke about this generation as the sons of Marx and Coca-Cola. It was Marxism everywhere, all types of Marxism, Trotskyism, Maoism, etc. There were, of course, there was some remnants of the fascists, especially in France, but there were remnants of the past. But to speak about new fascism, new kind of fascism, was something very new. And there's someone who saw the same things. It's a poet, and it was Pasolini, and poet, Italian filmmaker. And he saw the development of the society because he could compare with real fascism, or fascism Mussolini in Italy, and he saw that even if he wanted to do it, Mussolini couldn't enter the minds of the people. He couldn't just control the bodies, send people to war, to colonial wars, etc., and set Italian in a catastrophe. But he couldn't control the minds. And Pasolini said with TV and with the new school, which only teach you how to not to have a great culture, but just how to conform yourself to this kind of new language. He studied the evolution of Italian of the medias, etc. He saw this kind of evolution with and in the what they call, there's something in their analysis which is very close, because they understood that with this permission for the consumer, it can lead to anything. And Clouscard said everything is permitted, but nothing is possible. It was everything is possible for the men who can who had the consumer goods, but it's always within a framework of exploitation. It's always due to the conditions of exploitations which are haven't been changed. And Pasolini, and with a very poetic point of view, and Clouscard with his analysis, so quite the same thing. And they didn't know really each other. Of course, it's Clouscard who should have known Pasolini afterward, because Pasolini was murdered in the 75. But he was not so interested in his cinema. But I spoke a lot with him, and so there are some. It's insane how close you are on this point. And it's true that when this kind of society doesn't work with crisis, the only solution for people who completely got away from a kind of moral, because he advocated a Marxist moral. He said you should never consume more than you produce. That's a materialist based moral. If you get away from it, you create a completely two-tiered society, and the only way to pursue it, to put it to an end, it's to get to fascism in order to have a dictatorship on the consciousness. And that's why you have some this neo-fascist movements in Europe. I saw, for instance, just maybe to get back to the current events. I saw the debates in the US between the two imperialist Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and you can reach to a point that Donald Trump is saying strangers are eating dogs and cats, and so demonizing the stranger. Of course, we in France we are eating frogs, so it's another kind of things. But we can reach to this point of just in order to maintain an order which is unjust, and to which point is difficult to say. It's a process. That's why I think I prefer speaking about fascisation better than fascism, because it's true that you don't have some Sturmabteilungen, you don't have the fasci di combattimento, you don't have all the things we saw in Germany, in Italy, which were completely aimed at destroying the workers' movements, etc. But for instance, with Macron, which is very liberal, an homme du monde. When there were the yellow vests, he sent the police with order to shoot at people on their eyes. 100 people lost an eye, and it was a way to provide people from demonstrating in the streets of, especially in Paris, because they were very close to the Palais of l'Élysée at this moment. And now you saw this blackmail in order to make pressure against Russia and to go to a third war. And France is coming to a point which is more dangerous even than the United States. When you saw the very bellicist declarations of President Macron in the recent months.
I think it would be helpful to elaborate the class composition that Clouscard identifies in neo-capitalism, so that we can see this dialectic between production and consumption that subtends the thesis of neo-fascism. So the first order is what Clouscard calls survivalist, which is like the immigrant foreign worker. It's kind of sub-proletarian. Second order is, so that's survival. Second order is governed by need. This is the subsistence level. So they rely on it's basically like what is left of the proletariat, the working class. The third level is what he calls the order of desire. This is what Clouscard calls the new middle strata, which the Freudian Marxists, by the way, theorize as the agents of revolution. So their
Yes.
theory of revolution is to
He doesn't agree.
accelerate,
He doesn't agree at all
accelerate,
with this.
yeah, to accelerate revolution
Mm-hmm.
primarily from the site of the market of desire, and to render the other two class categories, the traditional proletariat and sub-proletariat, as of course reactionary subjects who are ineligible for revolutionary agitation in some sense. So it's you see this in Marcuse, you see this in Frankfurt School as well, from the standpoint of their understanding of social class. The revolution now should be marginalized. It should be young people, should be college students, and so on. The theory of revolution is based on a logic of transgression, but that transgression is largely focused within the field of consumption. And then, of course, he has a fourth tier, which is the order, what he calls the order of luxury, which is Nueva Riche, elite bourgeoisie, etc. But the most important one is the new middle strata. And I wanted to ask you about this because we do want to, we have a plan of translating Clouscard's work called The Metamorphosis of the Class Struggle.
Yes, it's good to make the link between the both. That's fantastic.
Yeah, because I think this is essential to understand how Freudian Marxism contributes, unbeknownst to itself, okay, unintentionally, to the perpetuation of neo-fascism. In some sense, its praxis contributes to it. So that's a very powerful critique in some sense. And I think that we have, many of us have an intuition that this is a flaw of Deleuze and Guattari. There's many reactionary thinkers that incorporate Deleuze and Guattari's ideas. I'm thinking, for example, of the neo-fascist philosopher Nick Land. You know, he says that the origin of his thought really comes from anti-Oedipus in some sense. So I thought this might be helpful for you to explain what Clouscard means by the middle strata, because he says that its composition is based on an internal contradiction of old forms of bourgeoisie. So there's a confusion about, in Freudian Marxist praxis, about a rebellion against the old morality of the bourgeoisie. But the old morality of the bourgeoisie has already been obliterated and sublated and overcome by the system. So what ends up happening is a kind of neo-Nietzschean morality of a permissive demand that obliterates all morality. The same thing that Lukács talked about in Destruction of Reason in his chapter on Nietzsche in the Age of Imperialism. This is exactly what Nietzsche wanted. Yeah? Well, the dialectic of that outcome of a permissive anti-moralism, I think Clouscard is saying that there's a correlation between that and the production of neo-fascism. Can you say more about this dialectic?
Yes. I think you're completely right to make this link between this description of the new classes, new way of describing classes, which is part of neo-fascism and the ideology of desire. It's a book of 1972, and which the book maybe it will be sooner or later published in English. And you thank you for your help, Daniel. Which is the metamorphosis of class struggle. In a way, it's the same subject, but because there was the main distinctions at this moment, and even his opponents were speaking about metamorphosis of class struggle in a way, but he had a complete different approach. As you mentioned, people like Marcuse said that the workers has been sold, the working class has been sold itself for a lens plate. I don't know if it's understandable in English, yes. And because they were part of the consumer society and they were no more the subjects of the revolution. And you just can rely on students and things. Of course, everything as a single person is welcome in every revolutionary movement. I don't want to make um, comment dire, I don't have prejudice on it, but as a class, when you analyze this class with great masses, the main contradictions in capitalism is on the production basis, is within the production. It's not the way of consuming, the way of being, the way of with that you cannot really make a contradiction and fight against capitalism within a united working class, united with on the basis there's no more nothing is always new. I think the Leninist way of organizing a party, a working party, has not. I don't think we invented something new from this point of view, and saying like Marcuse that only the not only the students, but I know people completely on the margin of the society, they will be the new subjects of revolution, is something that helps in reality capital. And I saw that there was a lot of the books that have been published on Marcus, saying that he was a member of the secret services, American services. Of course, it was normal and during the war against fascism, because he helped American government fighting fascism. I don't have anything against it, but he remained he remained a kind of spy during this period. And what he said, it's very interesting to compare it, because it's true that it was typically the declarations that completely weakened the workers movement. And excuse me, Michel Clouscard was absolutely against this theory. It opposed the word that was very common at this moment, that was, we are bathing in a consumer society. And he said we don't consume enough. It's completely false. Saying that it's something very Puritan, and it's a way of impaling people to rebel themselves on basis grounds, and to make strikes, to discuss the productions models, etc., etc. And he said, for instance, in the description of classes that you made, Daniel, let's start with the working class, and he said they have had access at this moment in the 60s. They have had access, for instance, to a car. At this moment, everyone had already his car. Maybe in the US it was much before, but in France it was a little gap. I think this moment was quite the same. And people said, okay, they have their car, so they have access to luxury, and there will be no more revolutionary, etc., etc. But Sartre said these are equipments goods, only equipment goods, because with all the big cities, if you don't have a car, you cannot go to work. They have access to the possibility of continuing the exploitation. And for instance, the washing machine at this moment, that was something a bit new. A washing machine, that was the condition in order that every woman could work, or could also work, and not going to to the river, washing a lot of hours, like that. Of course, women and proletariat women have a lot of work, but with washing machine for everyone, all these equipments, with fridges, with cars, etc., which were described as luxury objects, they were, in country, the conditions of continuing the capitalist production. So it's that these are, of course, you can use your car in order to make a walk in the forest. I don't know, with friends, but that was not the main thing. So let's forget consumer society. Don't speak anymore about consumer society, and let's concentrate on the working conditions. That's the part for the working class. And he said for the we are talking about neo-fascism. It's true that fascism, historical fascism, was based on the middle classes. It was a way of an alliance between the middle fascism and, of course, the high bourgeoisie, which funded Hitler, Mussolini, and so on. But there was a very a big change from the old middle classes to the new layers. He didn't want to use the term middle classes because, in his way, they were the main difference between the fascist middle classes of the 20s or the 30s. These people were all little sellers with independent salaries, making their little shops, etc. They were not workers, they were not part of the bourgeois circles, but they were independent, and they were mobilized with patriotic, nationalistic mottos and so on. But the new with the 50s and with something was completely new, that was the Marshall Plan, that completely reshaped the economy of Western Europe. There was a possibility to pay the middle classes in order to make them part of the salarymen, and to enter them within within these new classes, and making them consume like petit bourgeois codes, with all giving them the access to all these codes of libidinal, ludic, and marginal consumption. That was another concept of Clouscard. They had access to it because they were part of the salary, and they had the possibility, which was given not because they had this economic possibility, but because they were integrated in this new society. And this kind of integration is a new conditions of a new fascism, because it's completely it gives you only a conscience that you are completely separated from the masses, from the people, and it makes you need the distinction. Like Bourdieu wrote a book on it, Distinction, with this always the need for difference. And we were talking with Gabriel Rockhill when we wrote this book about Requiem for French Theory. The main concept of French theory was always thinking that difference is something good in it. No, and not equality between all the men, not the revolutionary means, but always speaking about difference, which is always endangered by totalitarianism, etc. But in a way, it was a kind of ideology. You spoke about the class Weltanschauungen. It was a kind of ideology that completely appeals to these new layers, which were part of the salaryman, and which had this access to this new kind of consumption, in order to have access to what they thought as a kind of new personality, and to distinguish themselves from the masses, from the workers. And that was part, and even the access to these new thinkers, to these fashionable thinkers like French theorists, was part of the theory at this moment, of the ideology at this moments. And so that was a part of the metamorphosis of the class struggles. But the main subject was, you have to choose between remaining true to the working class, and see how they could develop themselves, and put the contradictions of capitalism to its end, or just imagine a kind of imaginary utopian communism. And Badiou, for instance, he conceived he forged the concept of utopian communism, hypothetic communism. That was his very recent concept, and I think it's part of the same strategy, the same reaction to this new new structure of classes in France, and in of course there was the same story with the Western world.
I mean, it's often overlooked, but Marx once made a remark. You're probably familiar with it. It's funny to me that a lot of Marxists don't reference this enough, in my opinion. But he said, in any given epoch, the ruling ideas are an expression of the ruling class.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is, I think, the thesis of Clouscard, right?
Mm-hmm.
To prove that, to show how that, right? To demonstrate that, right?
Yeah.
And again, you've done an excellent job. Can you say something a little bit more about his style? Where does Clouscard's style emanate from? I only ask that because it's a little different than most French philosophers. It's more accessible. You already made the reference to Balzac. There is a
Mm-hmm.
feeling of a he's not like a scholar in a way which is nauseating. He writes in this almost kind of that feels like a manifesto, or it feels like something personal. He writes in theses. He also writes, I would even say, in a proleptic fashion, like for what will be. It's not it's not prophetic, but it's proleptic. It's pointing to um, a way of conceiving social reality. That, I think, is also why Clouscard will invent characters that he, the writer, is speaking to. Yeah.
Yes, it's true.
In the Seduction book, like I said, I was so struck by that fact. It's a beautiful strategy as a writer, because he's trying to speak directly to a reader who finds themselves alienated from the libertarian liberalism of the left-wing intellectual. You see, because he also says that the left-wing intellectual cannot see the errors of their epistemology.
Yes, he wants to describe alienation in these new
Yeah.
conditions, and he helps himself with literature tools. And it's true that he's not interested in narratives in the story, and it's true in a way he's a pupil of surrealism in France that didn't want to make novels. Beginning with it was this phrase was famous, the marquise went out at 5 o'clock, etc., etc. We don't care about what will do the marquise, and so something about this love story, etc. But literature as a tool is always um, always used by Clouscard. You're perfectly right when you said that he uses different approach. Sometimes it's like a theater pieces. In neo-fascism and ideology, it begins like that. And in capitalism of seduction, there is a wonderful Bazachian scene. It's the La Maison de Campagne. I think I couldn't translate it. It was a house in the countryside, which was parts of the propriety of peasants in the 60s, but all these beautiful old houses were left by people who had to work in the big cities. And after that, there was a real speculation on these new houses with the new bourgeois acquire some wonderful villas like that in the Luberon, for instance, where Lacan and Althusser, Lacan was ailing Althusser's neurosis, for instance. It's the south of France, etc. And it describes magnificently, and the meeting in this kind of villas of the old bourgeois, the man of the right parties with all his money, etc. And that's the part where he meets his son, which is the typical leftist student, who thinks this is the core of the revolution. And in this framework, in this in this countryside, they get along together because that's but all on the backs of the peasant who has been alienated from their own house and exploited in Paris and in the factories of the north. So it's a Basetian story. You don't need to know how it finishes because and how it started, but it's this description describes all the story of the France of the last year, and the compromises and the lies that have been told to people. And he said, for instance, like 68, he said it's the same story between the stern father, which was De Gaulle, and the prodigal son, which was Cohn-Bendit. But it's all within the bourgeois family, and
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end they will get along together.
yeah. Because it's I want to invite you to say something about the theory of worldly initiation that he develops vis-a-vis what I consider almost like a new theory of class paternalism.
Hmm.
If you see what I mean, in the sense that what he has this idea of the potlatch, of the kind of ludic celebration that is permitted in the market of desire to realize your highest self. But he follows this logic further, and he shows that this bottoms out into a kind of bourgeoisie that is fine and content to embrace a kind of anti-moralism. And he shows that this anti-moralism that is produced through the an almost neo-colonial Marshall Plan arrangement itself is perfect for big business, because big business and big capital does not is itself anti-moral. They're fine to have a society beyond morality and so on.
Hmm.
So naturally, I think a lot of readers will resonate with Clouscard in this regard, and maybe they will think, well, Marxism in this age should say something about morality. Hmm?
Hmm.
Maybe you could say something about this point. And I also do want to ask you about the book on love.
Hmm.
If you could
Yes.
say something about that as well. But first, maybe say
Yeah.
something more about this initiation, the potlatch, and the yeah,
Yes. One of
the
the key
yeah,
concepts, in my opinion, would be anthropological training. And that's the main difference with the old fascism, where these middle classes were only based on archaic reactions with archaic values, dogmatics, religious way of thinking. I don't know. But with this new fascism, it's very much more difficult to understand, and to understand how alienated you are, because you are stuck in all this kind of models of distinction models that completely are reshaping your mind, and you can think that you are a person of the left, which is progressive and so on. And I think like the left in France, they don't have any clue about what imperialism is, and they think that it's just nice to help the poor Ukrainian. Of what they do is they're helping the Ukrainians to die in an infinite war, which has been fostered by the US. Because two years before, they could have just retook to peace treaty. You know that France was observing a member of the peace treaties, and the French president of this time, Hollande, said that it was just a trick to give time in order to attack Russia afterwards. So that was just an example, but instead that just with good conscience you can be completely um, a part of the an entire system, just without being especially like things like Trump with his old archaic fascism. I think that Biden and Kamala Harris are even are dangerous, as dangerous as Donald Trump from an imperialistic point of view, except that the main difference is that Biden and Harris are against Russia, and Trump is against China. So you don't know where you will begin World War III. You just have in the US you have just the choice of choosing between the beginning of the World War III. So it's and that because you're entangled in these needs, and that's how it works, and it should have been described how you create this kind of reflexes that are in fact completely always against the workers' movement, was its capacity to oppose to capitalism, and it's true that in fact they have won the first game because communism is weak in Western societies, but there are a lot of there is another world. There are the global south, and they're asking themselves how to develop themselves, resisting imperialism. And I think that's they don't have to struggle with all these false representations, which are due to community fetishism in a way, and even in thought there is community fetishism, and you cannot imagine how many times you can lose trying to understand French theorists, and after a long time, it's like my friend Rocky. He have studied it for 20 years, 40 years. He has been he has a PhD with Badiou or with Derrida, and he said at this moment he completely lost his time because he understood that the only objective was to conceal Marxism. Of course, it's not for a great philosopher. It's not losing its time because you afterwards you can how to you have the possibility to contradict people to really get into their works, but at a certain point it's not like modern art. It's not a philosopher and then another that you have to discover. You're entangled in this. When you're entangled in the visions of things, you're incapable of organizing yourself as a worker, as a citizen, etc., and etc. And maybe that's why we need some people to address the society, how it works, and to describe it from I would say sociologic point of view. But it's when I compare Bourdieu, which is very famous in the Anglophone world, and Clouscard, which is not, their method are completely different, because Bourdieu is always making a statistical approach of things that are obvious, that we at the same you have at the results what we you had at the beginning. And with Clouscard, he insists on what is new. For
Mm.
instance, of course, there are still some patriarchalism, so the leadership of the man in the family, and Bourdieu described it, but there's nothing really new. But the use of feminism, of some kind of feminism against Marxism, and there is a feminism which is pro-Marxism. That's something new to understand, to analyze. That these are the main the things that helps you developing your thoughts. So and especially Bourdieu was completely erased Lucien Goldman from. But these are some choices which has been made by with the help of the EHESS in France, which was funded by the Americans with the help of Raymond Aron, and you can always track the fundings, how it worked, and so on. And it's true that French theory was a key problem at this time, but you have to put itself in the concept of Western Marxism in general. And we had to study Frankfurter Schule, school. For instance, we had it would be nice to analyze or other schools like that. And it's true that French theory, for instance, now is more represented by non-French people from the third world. I think Gayatri Spivak, I think Walter Mignolo, decolonial studies, all the things like that. And it's true that the aim is always the same thing: is banish Marxism from universities and publishing circles and etc. etc. But I always thought that not publishing Clouscard in English was was a crime. But I think with a lot of time, because he died in 2009. I think now it's time. I think it will. I know that sooner or later it will be done, and people could have access to his work.
Yeah, we need it because I think when I read Clouscard, I feel that he expresses the uh, repressed basis of his time. He's you know, he takes that Hegelian approach that philosophy is about the comprehension of one's own time and thought very, very, very well, and
Mm,
one feels not that it's dated, but one feels that ah, if you understand Clouscard's method, you could repeat or try to replicate this mode of doing philosophy, this this style of doing philosophy, which emanates from Lukács to Goldman to
mhm,
Clouscard. So then the question is, okay, well, how can you then take a Clouscardian approach to the United States? To how could you understand the worldview of the contemporary bourgeoisie? That's what I feel when I read Clouscard. That's what I want to do, you know?
mhm,
Number one. Number two, I get the feeling of a profound materialism in an analysis of the intelligentsia, of the left intelligentsia, that is unprecedented in terms of the clarity of and the effect of that could be equally profound for young readers. I wanted to ask you about Clouscard's conception of praxis. His final book was called The Paths. You could, I guess, translate as The Paths of Praxis. It was a very ambitious book. It's quite long. It's I don't know if it was fully finished. It's on philosophy. It's
mhm,
kind of like the on. It's a turn to ontology as well. Um, and in this text, as well as his text on civil society, one of the things he's trying to develop is how Lenin's strategy can be reborn.
mhm,
Could you say something regarding this idea of Clouscard strategy, praxis, Leninism?
mhm,
Because he also has this important notion of the collective worker. He's not he's not Stalinist. He's not falling sway to economism, what Lenin called economism. So he's not exactly like a class reductionist or something like that,
mhm,
as the liberals say, right? You see my
mhm,
point. So he is, I think, has a very, very compelling allegiance to Leninism in the 1980s and 90s when he's writing, which is remarkable,
mhm,
right? In an age where nobody talks about Lenin. I think even Balibar, who was one friend of mine, said Balibar renounced Lenin recently. You know,
mhm,
all of these French theory, many, not all of them, but many of them. That's an important point. What is their position on Lenin?
mhm.
Clouscard
It's
remains infidelity. Can you explain this more for us?
mhm. Yeah, you speak about the Clouscard at the end of his life. It's true. I wasn't just saying that he was not an ontologist. I was just saying that he was not something what wanted to create another Marxism. That's the only thing I wanted to do to express. But maybe what he insisted on it, it was a link between thought and sensibility. In its way, is very close to Jean-Jacques Rousseau because he said all the great thinkers, or maybe it's Dominique Pagani, which was his close collaborator, which explained it to me, because it's true that every, um, uh, I think, infinite philosopher, the best philosopher in the world, I say Plato, Rousseau, they always speak about uh, the Republic, and Le Banquet. Symposium. How do you say in English? It's the book on love of
The
Plato.
symposium. Yeah, the symposium.
The
Yeah.
Symposium, and for Rousseau, it's the Social Contract and La Nouvelle Héloïse, New Heloism. It's a book that completely reshaped the way of thinking, the way of feeling at this moment. People reading this book were completely shivering. Uh, that was absolutely new. And Clouscard said we have to study the sensibility from a Marxist point of view. In a way, this a new continent that we have to study. And that was he wrote a book on love and the conditions of productions of love in the society. Not only and it's true, he was part of the southwest of France, which was part of where was invented conscious love with the Occitan poets and so on, in very specific conditions in France. So it helped him explaining these things. And of course, he was at the end of his life, he was more concentrated on what he called praxis. It's true that in this way, I'm not completely wrong when I say that he was not an ontologist, because there's a difference between ontological approach and praxis approach. And I think it's debatable, it's arguable, because either you concentrate yourself on dialectics of nature, for instance, and I think that's very interesting. Other uh, either no, you concentrate yourself on praxis theory. You think that all the philosophical categories only are perceptible beginning with the praxis. So that was the approach of Gramsci. That was the approach of Adolfo Sanchez Vasquez, the Mexican, but he came from Spain, philosopher. Uh, it maybe I wouldn't say that I'm completely okay with it personally. I think that the main problem of Goldman, Clouscard, but all the thinkers of this time, it was just after the Lysenko affair. You remember this problem with the two sciences, things like that, and because it was a failure at this moment, the way of explaining things like that, Marxism shunned sciences like biology, but the problem is that Marxism is an entire philosophy. It's a way of thinking. It's an ontology, and if it did not develops itself, and if it not develops its core like dialectics of nature, which is on what Engels wrote book on it, and Lenin too. You accept that other do have ontologies like Heidegger ontology, for instance, like liberalism ontology based on the individual, for instance, which is an abstraction, in fact, which has nothing to do. You have to concentrate yourself on ontological problem. But I understand that there is a debate between us, Marxism, an ontological approach or praxis approach. Thus, this completely remains open. Of course, these final works of Clouscard are very interesting, and this collective worker, it's something he described. He wanted to replace production at the center of the political life in France. And France invented a republic with equal citizens, and the Declaration of Human Rights. Of course, it was a great path, but without taking it into account the economic differences that could be enormous, huge, and that's why. Where the beginning of all the thoughts of Marx in the critique of the rights, the thought of rights of Hegel, the limits of the Republican thought. And what he wanted, it was like at the beginning of the French Revolution, there were the ancient regime. There were three stratas, three layers: the aristocracy, the priests, and what they called the tiers état, which you had some highest bourgeois, and you had the lowest people, everyone. And le tiers état said, "We are nothing, we can be all," etc. And that was the final dissolution of this divisions of status in France. The end within the 4th of August 1789. It was just in a single day, in single night, 1,000 years of feudalism completely disappeared in France. So he wanted the same, saying we must have within the parliament in France representative of the collective workers organized on production, just to enter the institution. And after that, we will completely base democracy on production. That was its aim. That was a strategy, and explains that in a Metamorphosis of a Class Struggle in France in the 19th.
Can I
I think is interesting, and it's something we have to work together. There's thinkers. I love what you have said, that it gives you the idea of taking its example to address the American society right now. That's marvelous, and I thank you for it, because it gives me some faith and hope.
so what would you say in the so he Clouscard dies in 2009. He obviously lives at a time in which the party form is defunct, is gone.
Mhm.
What was his prescription regarding the party? You just mentioned this very interesting idea about a kind of parliamentary seizure and so on.
Mm,
Could you say something about his? Does he elaborate a theory of a revolutionary party
mm,
in this context? Because I know he has a book on civil society, which I mentioned to you before,
mhm,
playing off of Hegel's thesis, and I think a fragment of Hegel where he says, if civil society it ends up being governed by the market, it will be the site of a great beast, the beast of civil
mm,
society,
yeah,
which is exactly what neoliberalism is, right?
for sure.
Um, but in that context of a neoliberal era, yeah, what does Clouscard say regarding revolutionary strategy for the party, the
Mm.
Communist Party? How do
Uh,
you resurrect the party?
After he gave me when I was with him, he has shown me his papers, something he couldn't publish. For instance, that was a letter to the French Communist Party, because at the moment of his life, he was published by little publishers, and then he was published by the French Communist Party, where he reached a great audience, and his masterpiece like Capitalism of Seduction, for instance, and other books. And the problem with him is the editions of the French Communist Party completely disappeared. Maybe with his book on love was maybe the last, the last of their works. So it was like it's sending a missile and completely exploding in the air, which was very difficult to him. But it's true, when he was writing to the French Communist Party, it was at the period of after the abolishment of the dictatorship of proletariat by the French Communist Party, and he discussed things like this very comradely, but frankly. He couldn't publish his work, so we published it after it. No, I think it was very. In a way, he wanted always to remain independent because his work was the major thing. He knew that it was good at it. He wrote every day, so he wanted to remain independent. But he was very close to a communist party that should be communist. But I would say, for my part, that the difference between me and the French communists nowadays is that I'm still a French communist. But that's and also we are a lot of people like that, because you know that at the last year the French Communist Party supported the war credits of NATO in Ukraine. That's something I think completely unbearable. But of course, I will not. We will not replace for us an entire mass party, and I understand that people should work in it or from outside with other groups like PRCF, for instance, which lots of intellectuals are part of it. Okay, there's a lot of way in order to recreate this party. And it's true that people are not only organized in these in this kind of parties, a lot of associations, and nowadays maybe there's a lot of circles. But I think that and I think that Clouscard also was remained truthful to the Leninist approach of organizing things, because as Lenin said, the proletariat has only one weapon: it's is organization.
That's helpful. Yeah, I mean, I have seen the after Francois Mitterrand comes into power, the hegemony of the Communist Party within the parliamentary system is completely evacuated.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if Clouscard theorizes some kind of extra parliamentary or like new way to deal with that stalemate, because in the parliamentary system it's a stalemate at the
Mhm.
level of representational power. It's
Mhm.
been taken away from the Communist Party. So what do you
Yeah.
do in that regard? It's a such a profound minority. So it like I don't know if you've read the wonderful memoir of Didier Eribon, the student of Foucault.
Mhm.
His memoir of growing up in the working class
Mhm.
outside of Paris, which was all Communist Party,
Mhm.
and how when he went back, it was all like the Front National.
Yes, yeah, it's
They
true.
replaced one with the other, you know. So
Mhm.
they have kneecapped, this, they just totally kneecapped the possibility of the
That's
of
despair. There's a sign of despair, and not so. It would lead to nothing, but to it's true that, but it's not. It depends on regions, but it's true that this tendency is huge. And Clouscard warned the French CP, saying we are what is going to win is a libertarian social democracy, a libertarian liberal social democracy. That's what you will have to suffer. And it's true that the French Communist Party loses a lot of support just at the beginning of the 80s. It had, in fact, nothing to do, quite nothing to do with the fall of the Soviet Union. And it's true that was a lack of strategy. And the problem with the French Communist Party, they published Clouscard too late. They published because they were very they couldn't understand his position. It was difficult to, even if Lucien Sèvres, maybe you know him, that was the greatest philosopher of this period, leader of the publications of the French CP. He was a close friend of Clouscard, and they were very anti-Althusserian both. But he waited, I think, 10 years to publish him. And someone of the publication said, until 15% of the votes, we will publish you, something like that. I don't remember exactly the percentage. In order to develop something like a Clouscardian strategy, um, they I think they have lost a lot of times, and afterwards it was too late. And it's a part I knew Clouscard at the end of his life. He was a bit secluded, very a bit lonely, and that was very sad. And even in France, he was not really known because of this problem of the publication. But we in France, just after his death, there was a huge interest for his thought, because a lot of people understood that he profoundly, deeply understood the development of recent France. It is part of our history. But I think it's interesting for all the Western world, in fact.
oh, completely. I don't get the sense that it's like a limited to France or sort of parochial. I think it's a commentary about the present, about this the conjuncture that he's analyzing is our conjuncture. We're still in it. We're still very much in it. So I really want to thank you for your insights. I want everybody to check out the book Neo-Capitalism with Iskra, published with Iskra, that you have written, and it's a very good introduction to Clouscard. As you mentioned, we're trying to work on multiple translations. I think that the Metamorphosis will be a good start.
Yes.
It's very accessible. It kind of summarizes other works of his, and then I think a third text which must come out is the one on Freudian Marxism.
Neo-fascism and ideology of desire.
Yeah,
Yes,
it would be incredible, because I think so many young people still see the anti-Oedipus trilogy as like the most important book of the radical left. I would say, yeah, it's a very popular book, and I mean, I myself have read it like 3 times. I've done study groups on it and so on, and but it took me a while after I had to actually think about its application of its concepts and ideas to see its shortcomings. In that sense, it's very difficult for young people to see the shortcomings of the book because it's written at such a high level of complexity and all of the dazzling references, So it's hard to, but I think Clouscard could help provide some kind of proper criticism of their praxis,
and that's wonderful to read both and compare. Yes, it's
Sure.
true.
Yeah, no doubt. In closing, are there anything that you wish to mention that maybe I have neglected? I know it's a lot that we've discussed. Anything you wish to say in closing or raise as a topic for discussion?
I think it's enthusiastic to discuss with English speaking people because there's lots. Our story our philosophical story has become an American story, and we are linked in many ways. And you help ourselves to understand what they have done with us in a kind of way. And I personally. I have I was not very engaged in learning English, but with a lot of American comrades, I think I will find the time to furbish more and to develop more my English to improve it in order to make some new other debates because it helps very well, and I think it helps us thinking on a global scale. Maybe we can discuss of it with other people from other nations. It helps us a lot. It gives us fresh air. And thank you very much, Daniel, for all you have done.
My pleasure. I would love nothing more than to bring you and your comrades, including Dominique, to the United States upon the publication of Clouscard's works into English. Maybe a series of lectures would be incredible, frankly.
Super.
We'll see what happens.
With pleasure.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening, and until next time, take care.